Good everyone. I hope you're having an amazing day. So today I'm going to talk about Batch Apex. This is one of the important topic in Apex, which I believe you guys should know if you are going to work on Apex, right? So the first thing first, you need to have an org. If you haven't registered for one, it's the right time to do so because I believe the best way to learn is by doing hands-on, right? So I logged into my org, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump into developer console. The way to do that is by going to this gearcog icon and going to go to developer console. So it will take you to developer console, right? So now I wanted to give you a business scenario first before we jump on the batch Apex, but I just wanted to give you what batch Apex is about and why we need to use it, right? So if you have a large chunk of data, right, which needs processing, then it's better to use the batch because batch process, right, it runs asynchronously, right? So that's the reason why the name came batch because it runs in the form of batch, right? You can have 50 batches run. Let's say you have to process 50,000 records, right? So you can run those 50,000 records using batch, and that's one of the advantage of the batch. Uh, so you can break those 50,000 into smaller chunks and can process it, right? So, and the advantage is if one batch fails, right, for whatever reason, uh, other successful batches won't be rolled back for what, right, because of the failure associated with the a single batch. So let's say you have six batches running, right? Out of which five batches are successful, and for whatever reason, one batch is trigger an exception, right? So that exception will not cause the rest of the five batches to roll back, right? So the five batches will work as such, right? Because it's already been committed to the database, so it won't have an impact based on the exception that's been raised by the sixth batch, right? So another one is that every transaction, right, it starts with a new set of governor limits, right, which makes it easier to ensure that your code stays within the governor execution limit, which is very important, right? So our business scenario, right? So let me take you back to this org, right? So if you remember, if you watch my previous episode, right, about triggers, I developed a trigger around a beer sold, content document link associated with the beer sold. So let me go back to that object here, beer sold, right? So the way the trigger works, right? If you so this specific object has a field called include doc, right, which is set to false by default. So when you upload a document here, right, it will go and take that flag to true, right? That's pretty straightforward. And but there's another drawback with this object. The drawback with this object is that we are importing the data not by the manual process, but by using data import. So what that means is that we are using an external system to maintain the information of the porter beer, but the beer sold object. So we every night the data get imported to this object using a data import process, or you can use the data loader, whatever, right? So that's the scenario, right? But the problem with the data import process or data loader, right, associated with this specific object, include flag include doc flag get ticked, irrespective of there's a document attached or not, right? For instance, this specific record has a document attached to it, so include doc flag should be ticked. But that being said, if you go to another, say for instance, dummy data, right? So it contains no attachment, but for whatever reason, right, because of the import process, it sets the flag to true, right? Because there's a bug in the import process. Let's assume for a second. I'm giving you a fictitious scenario, right? So this is an object, right? Business sold, which tracks the information about the beer sold information to the customer, right? And at end of the month, we generate a record based on an account, right? So, but this information is not manually keyed in each day, using Salesforce. Instead, it's getting keyed in using an external system for whatever reason. But the customer wants to maintain that information in Salesforce as well, so they import the data using CSV every or single day, using data loader or data import, whatever, right? But for some reason, they are sending a flag include dog set to true every single time. There is no test, there is no check in place to ensure that it get only ticked when the documents get attached, right? So we're going to implement that check later, but we have a faulty data in our system, right? So we need to create a batch process to fix the data. So what the batch process will do, it will go and look at this record, right? And it will look at the content document link object to see if there is any matching record associated with it. For instance, right, this ID, right? So for instance, this ID, as you can see, right, will have no information in content document link object, right? Because content document link object, if you remember, it has a linked entity ID which points to object, right? The content document link storing the file for. So in this case, there won't be any linked entity ID associated with it, right? So if you haven't watched my file attachment video or trigger video, I highly encourage you to do so, because I'm not going to talk about what content document link is, what content version is, because I covered those in details before. So I will put a link in the description below if you're confused what I'm talking about. So in simple terms, right, let me give you very, very simple terms. The simple term requirement is we have a flag called include doc, which is set to true irrespective of we have attachment or not. So we need to fix the data, right? If there is no attachment, the flag value should be set to false, right? That's pretty much all the requirement is. So if you go to this org and do a SQL query, right? So if you do a SQL query, you can see every value is set to true, which is not correct, right? Because, for instance, this record, right? Um, it contains no files, right? But it should be set to false. So that's exactly what we're gonna do using a batch Apex today. Okay. So I hope that's clear in terms of business scenario, right? Pretty straightforward, right? Nothing fancy here. It's a very basic business scenario. You might experience a complex scenario, but this is just a tidying up data cleaning part. What I'm trying to do using a batch Apex. So next time we're going to work with schedule class to schedule this batch Apex. And at the same time, I will teach you how to tidy up the code a bit, because today I'm not going to work with any patterns or something. I will write a very simple batch Apex class in a single class. I'm not going to split it into separate part, right? So, but that being said, I mean, since we are dealing with batch Apex, since we are dealing with advanced topic, I would highly encourage you to check out the design patterns, which is very important. Because if you're a developer, if you're a Salesforce admin aspiring to be a developer, I would highly encourage you to study design pattern, which is very important. Especially the enterprise design pattern, solid principles. These are very, very important. If you're planning to switch technologies, let's say in future, if you wanted to shift away from Apex to, say, Python, or say .NET or Java or whatever other technology or other programming language, it's always good to understand design pattern, which is common across every object-oriented language you choose, right? So a design pattern helps you to maintain your code. It helps you to add functionality in the future without breaking the existing one. That's more important, right? I mean, the last thing you want, you designing a solution, but you end up in breaking the existing change, which is very bad in my opinion. Okay, that's enough of talking. So let's jump into the solution now. Okay, so the first thing first, as I said, go to the developer console, right, which is a click away here. So we're gonna create a class here. Okay, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna create a come on class called beer sold batch. Okay, so that's pretty much the name I'm gonna give. So it's gonna take time to load. Okay, just all right. So we're gonna make this class as global, right? So now to make this class as a batch class, right, you have to implement an interface that's called database.batchable. So that's important. If you don't do that, then it won't be considered as a batch class. Okay, so we're gonna do implement. You remember my interface lectures? So that's all I'm gonna do now. Yeah, batchable, right? And you're gonna do S objects. So because we are dealing with S objects, right? So I wanted to keep it very simple. You can implement other stuff as well, but I'm not going to worry about it for now. Okay, just to give you. So you got to implement three methods here. Okay, one is the start, and second is execute. Third is the finish method, right? So these are the three methods you have to implement. Okay, so let's implement a skeleton for now. Okay, so what we're going to do? So we're going to do global database dot query. Come on, query locator. Right, I'm going to do start, and I'm going to do database dot batchable context, and I'm going to do PC. Yeah, I was going to keep it as a skeleton method, and we're going to do global void execute database dot batchable context. Yeah, and we're going to do BC. Okay, and here you have to give a list of a subject which you're going to deal, which you're going to query here, right? So in our case, we have to query beer sold because that's the object we are dealing with, right? Because that's the object we are targeting to update include dog field, right? So we expect that's an object which we're going to get here, but always assume that you're going to get the list of it because we're not going to deal with a single one, right? If you're dealing with a single um, record, why bother doing a batch, right? In the first place. So batch is not meant for that. So we're going to do beer. As usual, I don't remember the name of an object, so let's go and check it to the edit object. It's always good to check the name because I don't remember top of my head. So we're just gonna go to here. Come on, I don't want to do it. So we're gonna choose this one, beer salt. It's gonna go here, and it's just gonna do this. Oh, let's do, and I'm gonna do beer list. Yeah. Because what we're going to do, we're creating a skeleton method. We're not adding any functionality to the methods yet because I wanted to see, as you can see, it's giving an exception here because it's expecting a final method to be implemented. That's the global finish, right? So we're going to do global void, and going to do finish, and so we're going to do database dot batchable context. Let's do BC, yeah. Right, okay, so we're going to save it. So let me extend this. So we have the problem here. The problem here, because in this case, because it's expecting a return value, right? And there's no return value here. So let's start one at a time here, okay? So in this case, right, this is the code which get executed first when the batch gets run, right? This get executed the start part because this is where the batch is getting started. So what we want to do when the batch gets started, right? That's the question you have to ask. So we obviously want to get records from beer soul, right? Because that's the object of our interest, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to query it, okay? So what we're going to do, so we're going to do string query, okay? So we do select ID from beer sold, okay? And let me look at the flag. That's called include dog something. Where is it? Okay, so we're gonna look at this one. So include dog. So include dog. Okay. Where include dog equals to true because we are after the records of beer sold, which contains the value of include dog equals to true, right? We are not after include dog value set as false, because that's fine. We're not interested in that. We are interested in the faulty data where include dog value might have been set to true for those record which contains no files, right? Right. So what we're going to do, so we're going to do return database dot get query locator, right? So this is going to do query. You know, so I'll tell you what that will do in a second. Just a second. Let it. Okay, so see, no errors now, so that's all good, right? So what's happening here, right? So I'm actually querying this stuff here, okay? So select, this is a simple text, right? And I'm passing the text here, and it's database.query locator actually returns the record back to this execute method, the second method, right? So we are the first task, okay? Start. The start, as the name indicates, it's going to start the batch process, right? And what do you want to do when the batch process gets started? Obviously, you wanted to query the records from an object you want to process, right? So that's exactly what we're going to do. And that's exactly what we're doing here. And we are passing query to this database.query locator, right? So that's going to return a list of this object here. Okay, so this one, that's why I put beer sold. So if you're dealing with, let's say, select ID from account, right? So you won't put the list of beer sold here. You'll put the list of accounts because because it's going to pass the list of the object you are interested into this execute method, right? So you have to have the right params, right? So that's what you're dealing with. And the finish is when all the batch process get executed and the finish gets processed, right? So most likely, you wanted to email sysadmin saying, "Oh, these are the batches that's been successful, or these are the batches that's been failed." Or in our case, we're not going to bother with any of the stuff because we are not going to email anyone. So I'm just going to put a simple message: system.debug finish, right? That's all I'm doing. This is just to keep a placeholder, right? We are not going to do any emailing or updating to the database or updating any flag or something here. Okay, so all the stuff we're going to do here. Okay, so the thing is, now how are we going to approach this problem? That's the first thing. Okay, so we have to keep the so-called limit into consideration. We can't keep on querying this stuff, right? Because if you're going to keep on querying this stuff, it will hit the so-called limit and it will bombard the solution. So that's not exactly what we're after. Okay, so we have to minimize the usage, or in other words, we have to minimize uh, the so-called query count. Okay, so the first thing. Okay, so let me create a variable here. So let's beer sold. Okay, beer sold. So we're gonna do beer. Come on. Yeah, that's good. Beer list well. Okay, we're gonna do new list. This is just a placeholder collection. We have a placeholder collection. Okay, because we will need this variable later stage, and we're gonna do set. Set contains no duplicate values, right? And so we're going to do ID list. Okay, I'll tell you why I'm doing this. New set ID. Yeah. Let's do this. Okay. And we will do the loop through for. We have to loop through this one. Okay. Just to give me a second. Just going to do B. Yeah. Okay. Right. So we're going to do ID list. Yeah. Dot add. Yeah. So we're going to do B.id. Okay. All right, let me explain what I've done so far. Let me see if I can save it first of all. Okay, save. So the first thing what I've done, I've got a placeholder, right? This is a placeholder. Okay, this we're going to deal with later stage. We don't have to deal with this collection now, but I've created a placeholder so that we can insert the stuff to it. ID, okay, so this is the collection of sets of ID, which is important in this stage because I wanted to store the IDs of the beer sold. Okay, so So this thing, right, beer list will contain list of beer sold records. Like in this case, like let's go to the circle. Um, it will contain the list of this records, right? Because this is a query we did. So we will have ID, we will have true value, okay? So that's pretty much it will contain here, okay? So this is what it will contain, 8 or 9 records, right? So what I'm interested here is only the ID, okay? So I'm interested in only this one, okay? This one. I'm only interested in this IDs, right? So that's exactly what I'm going to store into an ID list, okay? Now I'll tell you why I'm going to do that. Because I wanted to query um, a content document link object. Okay. Now I can do single queries, going each, I can do in a loop here, right? Okay, select, what's that called? Linked entity ID from content document link where ID equal to this. So I can do for 8 times, 10 times, but it will hit a so-called limit, right? Because it's very bad practice to do a SQL query inside a loop, right? You have to bulkify your code. So that's one of the process for bulkification. Okay, so now before that, I need to create a map here. Map is another collection. So I wanted to do ID and ID. It's just a way to sort out the list. Okay, so just I'll explain as I'm doing stuff. Map list. Um, so I don't like to write every single piece of a code in the same method because it's not a good practice, because your method should not be too big, because it's very difficult to test it. So it's always good to separate it in a separate class or utility class. Because when I started, I did a mistake of putting everything in a one batch class. When I think about it, it's not so great. It worked, never had any issues, but was it difficult to test? Yeah, absolutely, it was difficult to test. Would I like to do it again? Absolutely not. So I'm just going to show you a very simple way now. And next episode we're going to tidy this code. Okay, so it sounds good, right? So because if I'm going to do everything today, it's going to take a long time. So what we're going to do, we're going to query a content document link. Okay, so we're going to do content document link. I'm just going to see, right? I'm just going to do select linked entity ID from content document link where linked linked entity ID in. Right now, hang on a second. Let me see if I can save it first, okay? If I can't, then okay. So now what I'm doing, I'm trying to get the list of um, so all the content document records which belong to this ID. So let's say I have, okay, let's say I'll just put it here. Let's say I have ID 1, right? ID 2, ID 3, right? So this is something I actually say ID 3, right? Okay, so out of which, let's say ID 1 and ID 2, ID 1 and I1 and 2 are part of what's it called? The content document link, right? Right. So what I'm doing here, I'm actually storing in a list, right? 1, 2, 3, and I'm querying content document link, saying select blah from content document link where ID, which is the linked entity ID. This is where you store the object ID, right? Where ID in this linked entity, so linked, just putting a short form, right, in, right, and what it will return back, it will return back a record containing these two, right, 1 and 2, right, because there's no data associated with 3 in content document link. So it will not give me three records here. In this case, I will get 2. So that's exactly what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to query. I have populated all the records ID belonging to beer sold, which contains the value include doc equals true in this list. And now I know that a lot of data is missing from content document link. That's exactly what we are after. So what we're going to do, we will store this into a map list, okay? Map list.put c dot linked entity ID, and I'm gonna store, this is maps like key value pair, right? So this is the key, and I'm gonna put the value as the same, right? Just to keep it simple, right? Because this is just a this is just um, to sort out the value which is not a part of the beer sold, right? Now we are done with ID lists because ID lists serve the job for us very well, right? Because I want to reuse the ID list again because I'm not gonna reuse it anywhere here. So what I'm gonna do, I want to clear the value of ID list, yeah, right? So I'm gonna clear the value here, okay. Now we will do so. Now we're gonna loop through this beer list. So we're gonna do beer sold. So actually, we have the. We're gonna put B1. Yeah, just gonna do beer list. So now we know which IDs in content document link are associated with the ID of beer sold, right? So that's the deciding factor for us here. So what we're gonna do, so we'll do if string dot is blank. So in this case, we're gonna do map list dot get b dot b1 dot id, yeah, and so okay. B1 dot id. Okay, so what I'm trying to do here, right? Okay, let's see. There's an exception here, which is I know that there's. Let me save this one again. Okay, that works. So what I'm doing here, right? I'm actually trying to get the value of content document link, which is a linked ID, into a collection, which is a map, right? Where I've set the linked ID as the key and the linked ID as the value, right? Which is pretty straightforward. And then I've cleared this list, right? Because this list was containing the list of beer sold ID, which we're not interested anymore. Now I wanted to make a new list, the list of those ID where uh, include doc value is set to true, but in reality it should be set to false, right? So in other words, so here, right, in this case, I'm actually checking whether this specific record belongs to content document link. If it's not, then I assume that this value should have include doc set to false, right? So I'm building a list of all those IDs where include doc flag should be set to false, right? So that's exactly what I'm doing here. Okay, so now we have the list of IDs, right? Which should be which should contain the ID of beer sold, whose include doc value should be set as false, right? But instead it was set to true due to data load. All right, now we have a value. So now the next thing is that we need to create a we need to query the beer sold and update it, and then put into collection, and then do a final update. I'll explain what I'm going to do. So we're going to do for. So we're going to do beer. Yeah, we're going to do beer sold. I always don't remember the name of a object, so I always prefer to copy paste. Oh, come on, that doesn't make sense. So that's gonna do there, beer sold. It's gonna do B. It's gonna do B. B. Final B. final beer. You can give it whatever name you want, because it just select include dog. Okay, so what we need, so I just need this. Yeah. So we're gonna do this. So I'm just gonna do select where ID in ID list. Yeah, and it's gonna do. So we're gonna do final B dot m. So that's the name. Include equals to false. Yeah. Okay, and we're gonna do. So we have beer list. This collection. Remember this collection I mentioned in the beginning that this is a placeholder. This is where it's gonna come handy here. Dot add, and it's gonna do final B. Okay, and it's gonna do right update beer final. Sorry, not this. Okay, and it's gonna do. Just gonna do try. I always like to put my code into try and catch exception ex system.debug ex.get message. Okay, so let me see if it works. Okay, so that seems okay to me. Control A, Shift Tab. So I just want to tidy up. So I'll explain to you in a second. All right. So what I've so what I've done here. Remember, I talked about ID list where I populated this list with the value of beer sold record, which should include doc equals to false, right? And then I'm querying the beer sold, right? And then I'm looping through it, and then setting to false and adding to a collection, which is a part of a bulkification. And I'm doing the beer list, right? So that's all I'm doing. So this is a pretty simple solution, right? It's nothing fancy here, right? We built it like in a half an hour. It's nothing big, right? So this is the very simple scenario. But that being said, when I look at the code, it's not so pretty, right? It's a messy code, right? Because I put everything in a execute method, which is not great. Okay. So next time we're gonna tidy up this code a bit, right? Because the thing is, you have to separate your method in such a way that it should only refer to, like in this case, right? It should only deal with simple stuff, right? It should be like method dot class dot something, right? That's all it should be dealing with here instead of writing entire business logic here. Because think about it, how do you test it, right? Tomorrow you might have to add another scenario. You can't go and keep on adding the changes here. It's going to break it, right? This is not really good practice, okay? We need to split it into a separate class, right? So some call it a service class, right? So that's another terminology you can use. Um, so, uh, so I often believe in separation of concerns. That's one of the biggest thing you have to understand when you are dealing with object-oriented programming, right? So class should not be open for modification; should be open for extension, right? You should not modify your class, right? But you should be able to extend it. That's one of the first. That's one of the design principle associated with the solid principle, right? Um, so, in this case, you actually have to modify this class, right? If you want to extend it, which is not great. So, yeah, that being said, that's the next topic, right? So today, for now, just keep it in consideration. This is how you write a batch class, right? So let me have a recap, okay? What we have done. So we have created a new class, right? Simple class. And to make this class into a batch, you have to implement it from an interface. That's the database.batchable. If you do not do this, if you do not implement this interface, then it won't be considered as a batch class. Okay, it will not be considered as a batch Apex class. It will be considered as a regular Apex class. Okay, so once you decide to implement this interface, right, you're forming an agreement or a contract with the interface saying that, look, I'm going to implement your three methods, such as start, execute, and finish, right? And start is the place where you actually query you wanted to get your record set, right? That's where that's the stuff you do in start to get your record set. Record set in this case is a records belonging to beer sold object, right? That's that's what we did. And then we go to execute, right, which is where the real magic happens, where you do all your processing associated with the records, which you decides to query under start method, right? So once you have that, you're going to do all the stuff here like we did here. We query we try to avoid the so-called limits. We try to form a strategy where we put in the collection, right? So this is exactly what I've done, right? And then and the final is this is the code which get executed to the last. So just a placeholder. I put it as system.debug, right? That's all the batch classes, but how do you run it, right? That's the thing. Okay, let's go to so you can schedule it, right? Which we're going to talk about next time, which is very important. That's how you normally run a batch class because you got to schedule it. You can schedule using a basic scheduler. You have to write a class for that, right? And you can use a Salesforce schedule tool where you can rely on hourly based scheduling. But if you're not interested in that, you have to write your own using cron expression. Um, we will talk about that later, right? So just to give you a context, what's coming next time. So go to debug here, okay? What we do, so we will create a this object here, database. So we're gonna do beer sold. Gonna do B. Just give a meaningful name for now. The B will work. Yeah. So we're gonna do database dot execute batch. It's gonna do P. So come on, just gonna put B. Okay. So what I'm doing, I'm telling split in each batch. You will have only 2 records, right? Let's say you have 8 records, right? Let's say you have 8 records. So it will create a batch of 4 because you what are you saying by putting 2 here? Split the batch in such a way that each batch should contain 2 records. This is I'm doing for testing. You can do bigger numbers. That's fine, right? So batch it will form 4 batch. If you have 1,000 records, it will form 500 batch, right? Which is not really well. It depends, depends on the requirement, depends on the context, right? Context is very important here because it depends upon your code, right? If your code is not capable of handling more than 2 batch, then I would say you need to redesign your code, which is not a good way to do it because I understand at times you might have to do lots of complex queries, which is a lot of complex operation, more than one query, maybe 10 queries. So that's why I said it based on context, right? Context is very important here. Please don't jump on the gun and say, "Oh, this guy is saying, oh, okay, it doesn't work." But we have complex scenarios, so that's exactly what I said. It is context dependent. Okay, so I've created an object. So let me explain it nicely here. So this is the batch class, right? I created an instance of a class. So B is the name of an object, which is a pretty boring name. So I would say beer. You know what? It's on there, right? So let's say, um, so porter beer, right? I'm a fan of porter beer. Okay, porter beer because it's autumn in New Zealand. So in winter, I don't drink lager beer because lager tastes crap in winter. Because I like lager in summertime. Winter, I drink stouts and porter. That's my favorite. Yeah. Okay. Right. So that's the name. So let me maximize it. Okay. Sorry for keeping a small screen. My apologies for that. So this is what I did, and then database.execute is the code which you're going to use to run this batch, right? So this is I put the batch, and then the number of records you should have in a batch. You can put 3, right? Sorry, or you can put 2, right? For now, I wanted to put 2, okay? So that means every batch contains 2, okay? Or you can put 8 if you want. That's your choice. All right, let me run this. Okay, so it's running. Okay, so now how to check where the batch is running or not, right? So the way to do that, go to your setup here, okay, and go to come on, all right, and go to Apex, yeah. Let's go to Apex Jobs, right? You can go to Apex Jobs here, and you see there, this is your batch, right? And this is name of a batch be sold, right? And you see 4 batches because that means that means we got 8 records, right? That's why we got 4 batches, right? Because what I've done, I've specified each batch should contain 2 records, right? So that means 4 out of, okay. All right, so hopefully we will have the right solution now. I mean the right data, sorry. um so what we're going to do, so we're going to run the same query again, okay. So I will close this one, and we're going to do, voila, you see, before it was all true, but now it's set to false. Let's test it first, right? Let me take this record here because I wanted to make sure that we got it right, right? Because I don't want you to update a wrong record, right? So we're gonna do this, okay, and we're gonna copy this. So this should contain file. If not, we have a serious problem because then you mucked up the data. Okay, so we have attachment, so this should be true. Okay, fantastic. All right, now let's look at the other one, which is false. Let's look at this one. Okay, so it shouldn't contain any files. If it does and it's set to false, we have a problem. Right, so okay, so we're gonna go, there's no notes in attachment, so our batch code works, so that's fantastic, right? Right, so that's how you do the batch code, right? And you have to understand one thing, right? When you write a batch, right, you have to go back to your drawing board and design properly, right, how you wanted to write a batch code. Please just don't jump on the code and start writing, right? Because that's not a good approach. You have to design which class you want to split out, which class you want to use as a service class or whatever class you call, right? Because you should not be writing your entire business logic inside an execute method. That's a very bad. Well, you should have a utility class, but please make sure that your utility class is reusable, right? Please do not create a separate utility class when there is already one existing, right? So you need to. So that's one. That's the reason why I love to use this tool. See the find, search and file, so you can look for something, right? It will tell you what all is there. It's just very handy. Right, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's session. Right, I'm gonna complete this Salesforce admin. I'm gonna wrap up in 2, 3 lectures, right? And then we're gonna deal with integration, which is exciting, right? So I hope that you guys are getting some value out of it because my main goal is to make you guys awesome developer, not just a developer, because there's no point in becoming just a developer. There are too many developers out there. If you got to stand out, you have to be a better developer, right? Developer who understand the requirement, who go to drawing board and bring the right design patterns, right? That's exactly what makes you a very good developer. Otherwise, Apex is just a tool, right? You can use C Sharp, you can use Java, right? But if you wanted to write a shitty code, then that won't make you a good developer, right? Sorry for my language, but I just have to be very direct. I'm not a politically correct person because I don't believe in that BS. Sorry about that. I just wanted to, keep my point to the. I just keep my point to the straight. Right. That's how I like to roll. Right. That being said, I hope you guys have an amazing day. Greetings and adios. See ya.